For those of you joining us via webinar, there will be, you can enter your questions at any time. There's on your control panel, there's a section that questions. You can just enter your question and I'll read it at the end of the presentation. Okay, so thank you very much everybody for joining the via webinar and here at ONA. So the presentation I will give today is just an update of the two ongoing studies that we have that were funded by the Florida Cattlemen's Association. And also about some of the extension programs we've been doing for the last couple of months. So both studies that I'm going to talk about, the whole idea is to improve the nutritional status of the females, the mature cows, so that we can improve their body condition score at the time of calving. We know that this is one of the most important factors that determines pregnancy rates of those cows in the following breeding season. So we want to improve their condition before they calve. But we also want to look at the impact of those nutritional status on how the calf will perform after birth. I'm sure you guys already heard about this term, this concept of fetal programming, that depending on the nutrition of the cow, during gestation, you can change how the calf develops to the point that he might perform differently after birth. So the whole idea is because each organ starts to develop during gestation, right? And each organ has a different time that it develops. For example, within the first 21 days of the after conception, the heartbeat starts to appear. Then you have testicles around day 45. Day 60, you have the ovaries, and then so on. Okay, so all the visceral organs, they start to develop during the first trimester of gestation. Muscle and adipose tissue, they form a little later. Mostly the muscle will be formed during the second trimester and continues until calving. Whereas all the cells that will be responsible for marbling scores, for example, they develop during late gestation. So each organ has its different window of development. So depending on when I change the nutrition of those cows, I'm going to affect one or multiple organs. So if I change the nutrition during late gestation, I might be affecting only adipose tissue and the muscle. If I change the nutrition during early gestation, we might be changing how the visceral organs are developing. So the same nutritional management applied at different times will have different consequences to the animal. Okay, so there are a lot of research going on with Bos Taurus cows, the English breeds, all over the United States, and most of them see some kind of response to the calf performance based on what you did to the mother. Okay, for example, these studies here, the 3 studies show that the steers born to cows that received protein supplementation during late gestation, they were heavier at weaning, they had heavier carcass weights, they had greater marbling scores, and greater percentage of carcasses grading choice or better. Right, and remember that figure that I showed you before, that muscle and adipose tissue are formed primarily during late gestation. So those 3 studies, they have a very consistent response based on how they fed the mother during the last 3 months before calving. Now, they also saw that the steers born from mothers that received supplementation, 10 times less calves had to be treated against respiratory problems when they were sent to the feedlot. So it not only changes how they grow, but there's also implications to their health as well. And what about heifers? They also saw that the heifers born from cows that received pre-calving supplementation, they were heavier at weaning, achieved puberty earlier, they also had greater pregnancy rates. And like I said, most of the studies with Bos Taurus cows, they show some kind of response to the calf based on how I fed the mother. But unfortunately, we don't know if that happens with herds that have a Boscinicus influence, like we have here in Florida. So we don't know if we also have the same response, and if we do, if there's any differences on magnitude. Do we see a greater difference between treatments or less than what people are reporting in other parts of the country? So both studies that I will talk about, they were funded by the Florida Cattlemen's Association, and I thank you for that support. This study started in June of last year, and it won't be done until March of 2020. So it's a very long-term study. We'll collect several data on that. So the first study is the effects of year-round supplementation of sugarcane molasses or range cubes, and what's the impact of this strategy on cow performance as well as health, carcass data, and puberty of the heifers. So the conventional treatment that we have here in Florida is that cows, they don't receive any supplementation except for the mineral salt before calving. And once they calve, we provide about 4 pounds of molasses until the end of the breeding season. That's close to 600 pounds of supplement per cow per year. So what we did was, instead of providing the supplementation just during the winter time, we spread the supplementation throughout the entire year. It's still the same total amount. We're just letting them have access to the supplement throughout the entire year. So what we did, we reduced the amount of supplement during the winter time, and that difference we provided during the spring, fall, and summer. Okay. The whole idea is that with the same amount of supplementation, I will improve their nutritional status before calving. Because they have access before calving, they will have greater body condition score at the time of calving, and most likely at the start of breeding season. So we think that this will improve the pregnancy rates of those cows. Also, we're improving their nutritional status throughout the entire gestation. So maybe we will also see a better performance in the calves born from those cows. All right? So, and then we also decided to add a third treatment that instead of molasses, what if I want to use something else? So we included a treatment where we were feeding range cubes. And they were designed to provide the same amount of protein and energy as the year-round molasses, but the difference is just the composition. Molasses and cubes, they will have different fermentation products in the rumen that will change the blood parameters in the cows. So with the same amount of energy and protein, we might have different responses in the cows. By changing those hormones and metabolites, they're also not only important for reproduction, but they also have an influence on calf development. So with the same amount of supplement, just by changing the composition, we want to see if that causes differences in the performance of the animal. Okay. So the first idea is to look at the year-round supplementation, and then the second is this composition of the supplement matters. So just to, if you are not aware of, this is how we feed our animals in those trials. So we limit the amount that each cow received by limiting how much they were offered in each week. Okay, so the molasses were offered in an open tanks, and then the cubes were offered on pasture, like you're seeing on those pictures. So the cubes, like I said, they were formulated to provide the same amount of protein and energy as the year-round molasses, but the primary ingredient was wheat mealings. Okay, we had to change the composition of the cubes throughout the year to match the amount of protein and energy, but the primary ingredient is wheat mealings and urea to be as similar as we could to the molasses supplementation. All right. Now, in terms of body conditioning score of the cows, we started the study in June, that's day 0. Weaned the calves in the first week of August, and cows start calving on day 161, that's November, and start the breeding season in January. Okay. So the first 74 days of the study, when the control cows did not receive any supplementation, and whereas the cows assigned to the year-round treatment, they receive about half of a pound of dry matter per cow per day, there's no differences in body conditioning score. Okay, so just to make it clear for you, this is the figure with the body condition score. This is the body condition score change for each treatment according to each period. And this is how much supplement I provided to each cow every month. All right. So the first 74 days, when we provided just half of a pound of dry matter, no change in the performance of the animals. All right, so they were acting pretty much as a vehicle for the trace mineral salt. But when we look at the blood sample, we do see changes in the blood parameters of the cows. So it was not enough to change the conditioning score, but it did change their physiological status. We think that this might cause differences on the calf performance. But once we increase the amount to 1.5 pounds of either molasses or cubes, that's when we started seeing differences on the body condition score. So whoever received molasses or cubes, they had greater body condition score at calving compared to the control animals. Right? And then one of the most important things here is the control animals that are not receiving any supplementation except for the trace mineral, they started losing condition score during the last month of gestation. Right? So the loss is very small, and sometimes you cannot notice that unless you are measuring very frequently, but they are losing. And we know, at least in other breeds, that this loss during the last 40 days, they don't change the pregnancy rates of the cows on the next breeding season, but they do have consequences to the immune system of the calves that will be born. So we do think that because of this supplementation here, we might have differences on how the calves respond to the vaccination. right? But the first goal that was to increase the conditioning score at calving, they were about 1 point higher than the control. We achieved that. And it seems that it doesn't matter if I use molasses or cubes, okay? Now, after calving, the control treatments, they start to receive 4 pounds of molasses, okay? And then the other treatments, they are getting between 2.5 to 3 pounds per count per day. So obviously, whoever is fatter has heavier, has a greater amount of fat reserves, has a greater energy requirements, and you're offering less supplement, they're gonna lose more. So that's exactly what happened. The cows that received the control treatments, they lost half of what the other treatments lost. We expected that to happen. But even though they lost more, they still had greater body conditioning score at the start of breeding season compared to the controls. So we think that because of that greater conditioning score at calving and at start of breeding season, they will respond better and have greater pregnancy rates than the controls. But once we start the breeding season, that's when things start to get interesting, right? So look at the cubes. Even though they receive the same amount of energy and protein as the cows in the molasses year-round, they're losing more conditioning score. We did not expect that to happen. Okay? We thought that it would be a very similar response to this orange line here. But for some reason, they are losing more than what we expected. And we really think that is the frequency of supplementation we are using. So even though the animals were assigned to receive an average, let's say 1 pound per day, we didn't feed those cows every day. We fed them twice weekly. So the cows, let's say, for example, they had to give, to consume 7 pounds in a week. We provided 3.5 pounds on Tuesday, 3.5 pounds on Friday. We don't think that this frequency of supplementation is good for this type of supplement. It's probably too much. Not as frequently as it should be. Because when you provide the cubes, they eat the whole offer within 20 minutes. But when you provide the molasses, they don't eat the whole offer in a day. It takes them a day, at least a day and a half, to consume the entire supplement offer. So the consumption during the week is more uniform when we use molasses. And we think that this is favoring that treatment. But when you use the cubes, they eat really fast. That's not very good for them. At least using this frequency that we have right now. Okay. So, but in terms of, but we still think that the cows that are receiving year-round supplementation, even though they lost more after calving, they will have greater pregnancy rates. Also, here, even though it's statistically different for these two treatments, the control and the ones that receive the cubes, the difference is actually only 0.2. So biologically, it might have no significance at all. All right. So we don't have the pregnancy rates yet. Breeding season will be done next month. And then once we do, I'll do a webinar again and we can update you on the results. All right. Now, in terms of calf performance, we started the study with 100% of the cows pregnant. So every treatment had a pregnant cow. Nobody was open. In November, we had some cows that lost their calf during pregnancy in these two treatments here. But I wouldn't worry too much about that data yet, because just 1 year data, we need more years to make it stronger and to actually draw any conclusions on that. Because the amount of counts is so small yet that any loss is a big hit on the percentage. So, but the most important data on this table here is that calving date do not differ among treatments, and also calf birth weights. So the amount that we provided before calving, the amount of supplement, was not enough to increase the size of the calf at birth. So we didn't cause any problems at birth on those cows. And that's a concern of several people, that if you provide supplementation before calving, the calves will be too big and you're going to have problems at calving. At least in our study, with the amount of supplement that we used, we didn't see that. And also, so far, there's no differences on calf performance from birth to the start of the breeding season, or birth until last month. All right, no differences in average daily gain. So different from the other studies that I showed you with Bos taurus, it's very unlikely that we will have differences on pre-weaning performance of those calves. Okay, but we're still going to collect this data until August. Okay. Now, the second study is very similar to the studies that I showed you before with the Bos taurus cows. We're just focusing on supplementation during late gestation, right? And that's because 2/3 of the calf growth during gestation happens during the last 3 months. So a lot of people consider this last 3 months to be the most critical for nutrition of pregnant females. So the idea was control treatment that doesn't receive any supplementation before calving. Once they calve, they start to receive molasses until the end of the breeding season. And then we added a treatment that is receiving about 2.25 pounds of distillers grains for the last 84 days before they calve. Okay, and once they calve, they provide the same amount of molasses as the control treatment. The idea is just that if I provide supplementation before calving, can I improve body condition score? Will I have an impact on the calf? And then we added a third treatment that instead of providing 2.25 pounds for 84 days, what if I double the amount of supplement and I provide that by half of that time? So provide 4.5 pounds for the first 45 days and nothing after that. This is still the same total amount, but I'm reducing labor by half. So the idea is that when I focus on the first half of the late gestation period, that's when their nutritional requirements is the lowest. So with the same amount of supplement, I will put more weight, more body condition score in the cows with half of the labor. Okay, and we'll see that what's the impact of these strategies on performance of the cows and the calf. So in terms of body condition score, the cows, whoever received supplementation before calving, as you would expect, they reach a higher body condition score at the time of calving compared to the controls. And we were able to achieve the same body condition score by providing 2 pounds every 84 days, for 84 days, or 4.5 pounds for half of that time. So we were more cost effective by focusing the entire supplementation amount during the first half of that late gestation. All right, and then we're gonna see if there's any impact on their performance. After calving, everybody's treated exactly the same. But because the cows that receive supplementation before calving, they're fatter, they are heavier, so they have greater nutrient requirements, they start to lose more condition than the control treatments. But even though they lost more, just like the previous study, they started the breeding season with a greater body condition score, and they maintained that greater score throughout the entire breeding season. So we do think that we are going to have a huge impact on at least the reproductive performance of the cows in this study. And then just like the other study, the breeding season will end the next month, and then we'll have the data on the pregnancy rates of those animals. Now, in terms of calf performance, also no differences on calving dates, no differences in calf birth weights, so up to 2 pounds of distillers for 84 days or 4.5 pounds of distillers for 45 days does not increase the birth weights of those calves. But we're going to collect the data again one more year to see if that's really, to make the data more strong. But, and again, similar to the other study, no differences on calf average daily gain from birth to start the breeding season, birth until last month. So similar to the other studies, very unlikely that we will have differences on pre-weaning growth performance of those animals. So different from the Boss-Tauler studies that we have in other parts of the United States, we don't see any differences on pre-weaning performance of our calves, maybe because of the contribution of the Boston genetics. If you analyze all the studies that were done with purebred Boston in Brazil, I found 7 studies that look at fetal programming. None of them reported differences on calf performance up to weaning, whatever you did to the cows before calving. So it seems that whenever you had the Boston genetics, they behave differently. And actually, you can find a study that was done in '91 that wanted to look at the contribution of the genetics of the mother and the embryo on how the calf developed during gestation. So in this study here, they had Brahman cows that carried Brahma fetus or Charolais fetus, and a Charolais cow carrying Brahma fetus or Charolais fetus, okay? And then they follow how much those calves were weighing throughout this gestation. So what they saw was that on day 232, that's about the 8th month of gestation, those animals, the cows that were carrying the Charolais fetus, they were about 74% heavier than the Brahma fetuses. And there's no effect of the genetics of the mother. They were exactly the same amount. They were heavier, the same magnitude, regardless of the genetics of the mother. But during the last month of gestation, the Charolais fetus, they were 54% heavier than Brahman if they were gestating in Charolais cows. and only 33% heavier if they were gestated by Brahman cows. So the Brahman genetics, in this case here, the Bos indicus, is controlling how the calf developed during the last final days differently. So it's not that surprising that the same nutritional strategy during late gestation in a Bos Taurus cow have a totally different outcome in a Bos indicus. Okay, so but we're gonna keep collecting more data on that. Now, these are all the data that I wanted to share with you right now. Like I said, we're collecting birth weight, body weight of the calves. We are gonna challenge the calves for the rest of the study. It might be the case that we're not seeing any differences on calf performance just because the calves are not fully challenged yet. Once we put them on a high plane of nutrition that we're really challenging for them to perform at their peak of performance, then we might see differences among treatments. But so far in our environment, we don't have anything. The steers we're gonna follow until slaughter, collect carcass data. We're gonna challenge the calves with their immune system and see how they are performing differently. And also the heifers we are gonna follow until the end of the first calving season. All right, so it is a long-term study. We think it's gonna be very good results. Now, what I wanted to do now is just to share with you some of the results of the educational programs that we started doing last month. So, in January. So in January, we started a 3-day program on nutrition for beef females, each day at a different county, and Dr. Vindermini helped us with this program. The whole idea of the program was to educate the audience on the importance of body condition score, also to share them the results that we collected so far at ONA for several years, and also to update the producers on the ongoing research studies that we have right now. So that's a very good way to connect the research program that we have with the educational program for our producers. All right, everything is information related to Florida only. And then during this training, we also educate the audience on how to properly body condition score the animals. So we showed a picture, before we started any presentation, we showed pictures of 10 cows. And then we asked the whole audience to score those 10 cows without any training. And then we calculated the pre-training scores, and we can see how many people actually did the right scoring before the training. Then we provided presentations. We told them some tips on how to do it. And then after that presentation, we asked them to retake the test again. So we did, and we got our post-training score. So the average was, for the 3 counties, was about 49% of the people selected the right answer before the training. And after one single training, we increased to 62%. That's a quite large improvement, considering that it's just one presentation that was done in a few minutes. So if we let the audience take a few more time to go through the data, to go through the training, that's very likely that this number here will be even higher than that. Okay. So, and this is the live version that we're doing face-to-face with people. But we also developed an online version of this training. It's pretty much the same presentation, but it's also going to be available online. It's the 2-part training. The first part is a short video about the importance of body condition score. And then you take your test. You're going to score the counts just like we did in a live version. Okay, and you're going to have your pre-training scores. Then you watch the second presentation on the tips on how to do it. And then you retake the same test again. So you're going to have your post-training score. You can see how well you did. And we also have several materials that will be uploaded there regarding research and some body condition score flow chart. So this will be a very good tool for somebody that doesn't have an experience on doing it. And I'm sure that in any operation, you have an employee or a family member that doesn't know how to do it, and they can take advantage of this. It will be free. You can take as many times as you want. All right, and you can take it using your phone, any laptop or tablet. Okay, it will be available in any platform. So we really think that this is going to have a lot of impact in our region. So we will continue to do the live versions, the face-to-face, but the online version will always be available. And we should get that ready in about a month. Okay. So, and also one thing that I want to mention is that this whole online version is started with this group here, the Cow-Calf Nutrition Working Group, Dr. Arthington, Lindsay Wiggins, Bridget Seiss, and Ed Jennings. They used to meet on a regular basis to discuss about nutrition. So in one of those meetings, they decided to collect pictures of cows of different body condition score throughout the entire state. So they created this database of several cows with different condition scores. What I did was I just got this database and I developed the live version training and also the online. And I wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for the help of Andrea. She's the one that's actually putting together the online training. And it's quite challenging to do. We thought it would be that hard to do the interactive training. So we really think it's going to be very helpful. And we, as soon as it's ready, I'll release it. And then you guys, I would ask all of you to take it. And you can send us all your suggestions before we share with the producers. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody, for their initial contribution. All right. So do you have any question about the trials or even the educational programs that we're doing? I have just one question here at the webinar. Yes.
In what form was the distillers grain fed to the cattle?
It's just a ground meal, and we fed 3 times weekly for those animals. So whatever they had to consume in the week, we provide on Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday. But it's a ground distiller. And the reason that I chose that one is because it's one supplement that I didn't want to mix supplement. I didn't want to create any mixture of supplement. I wanted to use a supplement that has a lot of energy and a lot of protein. So I could cover any deficiency that those animals might have. And the one that I used was the distillers. There's no particular reason besides that. Any other question? One question here is from John Arthington. He's saying, are you looking at the economics of your round supplementation? It seems that labor would be greater, but there will be a savings in mineral feedings and mineral feeders. No, we will do it. I'm collecting as much data as I can. And something that I didn't mention was, for the cows that receive the year-round supplementation, we mix the trace mineral salt into the supplement. Okay, so they were incorporated into the cubes or into the molasses. The control treatments, they were offered free choice access to the trace mineral. Right? They were not mixed into the supplement. So you have the labor of making sure that you have always trace mineral salt available for those animals. And you also have the wastage because of the weather, and animals also tend to not consume those salt during the summertime. So with the animals, when we incorporate into the supplement, we eliminate the labor of having to look at trace mineral salt feeders, and we also make the consumption of supplement more uniform on those cows. And we avoid wastage. Okay, so we are collecting liver samples of those animals throughout the year. We will look at their status of trace minerals for the entire year. Right, so yeah, that's something that we will do, and I'll definitely ask Chris to help us on this. Any other question? I think that's the only question. Here.
Do you believe the cows, if they were allowed unrestricted
access to the molasses?
Access to the molasses.
Yeah.
There's going to come a point in time where they're just going to go off. If it was in a big setting,
yeah.
this is so much more control for it's right in front of
yeah,
time.
yeah.
If you have a big pasture, I think there will be a time this year where
there is one data that was done on around, I think around 60 or 70 here in Florida in St. Augustine grass. For 4 years, they used mature cows that they did exactly like that. They let the cows eat as much as they wanted throughout the entire year. And I think they consumed 1,500 pounds of molasses. So yeah, the performance was better. The calves were heavier, but it never paid for the cost. So I limited because I didn't want to increase the cost of supplementation, except for labor, which is debatable if it's going to increase or not, because now you don't have the labor on trace mineral feeder management. So we'll see if there's any difference. The only reason I didn't provide more was to avoid any increase in the cost. But they did it once and didn't work. Yes. Yeah. So it doesn't matter the price of the calf, we'll never pay for it. There's a lot of variation that we can do. We'll see how the results come up on all those 2 studies, and then we can change it as we see the results. But it will be a very long-term study. It won't be done, like I said, 2020. But whenever it's done, we're going to have a lot of data. We really think it's going to be very impactful for the producers in Florida. Okay, so I guess thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Also, thank you whoever joined this presentation via webinar. Thank you.